Hello again, Sandwich. I'm Greg Anderson. Welcome back to another ATS. It does sound like someone's going to start dancing or there's going to be some voting going on, but it's not. It's just a couple of guys sitting and talking here in Sandwich. We are back with another Ask The Supt. I am here with our superintendent. I am so happy to see you again, Joe.
Great to see you, Greg.
How have you been?
Very good. How about yourself?
I've been good. I've got this cold, and I
Yeah,
think everyone's got it. So I would just ask, don't make me laugh, because I will cough, and when I cough, I wet myself.
That's, incontinence is no laughing matter.
It's no laughing matter unless you're on TV with the superintendent.
Yeah.
All right, I got some good questions for you.
Okay.
All right, so first question I want to ask is, it came to us via email, which is askOurSuperintendent@gmail.com. Thank you for those questions. What is social emotional education? Now, I know we've talked about this, but the question comes from a little bit of a different spin. I keep hearing about it in the principal's reports about programs. It sounds a bit like practicing psychology without a license. And speaking of licensed psychologists, does Sandwich School Department employ any?
Sure. So, really, a lot of times you hear it referred to as SEL, or social emotional learning. And I think it's putting things really simply is really teaching kids about their emotions so that they can ultimately self-regulate. If you really think about it, going back to being very, very young, part of the schooling process is teaching kids explicitly about how to socialize. And I think with all of the challenges and the stress and the anxiety and depression in society today, sometimes we have to be very, very explicit about teaching kids about their emotions, about their moods, being able to articulate it, and so on, so that they can control them. So I would say no, this is not about trying to be an armchair psychologist or teachers kind of going out of their lane. I would say it's more about good practices in establishing a positive, healthy climate and culture in the classroom, and then also school-wide.
So so is there a psychologist that's on?
We do have a school psychologist, but we also are very well staffed with counselors, but also school social workers.
Okay.
So they will work in conjunction with our principals, but also with our, teams of teachers in implementing various SEL initiatives. But I can't stress enough, it's not only a Sandwich thing. I would say it's across the Commonwealth, and it's also a nationwide thing of making SEL an emphasis so that we have healthy and positive cultures.
And that's done by your teachers?
By classroom, exactly.
By classrooms, narrowed down to that small scope of, I'm a student, I've got my teacher, but my teacher's got that sense of awareness.
And sometimes it's really as simple, if you and I were to go to Forestdale or Oak Ridge right now, you would notice in most classrooms there is a poster on the wall that is kind of like a square split into 4 quadrants with 4 different colors. And it's part of a program, really simple program called Ruler. And it's about teaching kids to identify what their mood is in any type of given day. And it's thinking about mood and energy. So kind of really simply thinking about it, being in the red, that's really bad. That means you're about to explode and so on, versus being in the yellow, think a mellow yellow, that you're calm, you're in a good state energy-wise, and you're ready to learn and so on. And think about the power of getting a kindergartner or a first grader to be able to identify what their mood and what their energy is. That's one of the first key steps in getting kids to regulate. And
Interesting.
I think that's super, super important, because you can't have, learning in, the basics of reading and writing and problem solving and math and so on, unless you have that regulation.
Yeah, very interesting. As a parent, boy, my kid's in a he's in a mood today. You know, this is
Yeah.
and as parents, we can recognize it. But yeah, it is interesting. My kids haven't been in the school system for some time now, but to have that awareness,
Yeah.
I think of your mood and where you're coming from.
Absolutely. And you know, even beyond that, part of what SEL is all about is really being explicit in teaching kids pro-social behaviors. And keep in mind, you know, and again, I do think Sandwich is a great community, and the overwhelming majority of our students come to their school every day with a lot of skills and the background and parents that are deeply invested in support. So we've got a very, very good, you know, population of students, but that's not everybody. And again, I always go back to this, Greg. Schools are a microcosm of society, and even in our little hamlet of Sandwich, there's all types of mental health issues. There's anxiety, there's depression, and so on. And the kids bring that with them into the school building.
Right.
So we have to deal with it. We have been dealing with it. I do think, you know, as most people would say, the pandemic definitely exacerbated things.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So having this explicit focus on social emotional learning, I think, is extremely important.
Got it. Excellent. Jumping to a different topic, on March 3rd in the Sandwich Enterprise, in your superintendent's notebook, is that a regular
It is.
piece
I'm
you're
going to be
now?
doing it once a month. I've connected with John Paradise, who's the editor, and you know, we kind of have an agreement. It's just another tool, just like this is, to get the word out.
Well, look, John Paradise and I went to college together. We both went to Emerson.
Yeah. He shared that with me.
We're the same age, but my opportunity for you to speak out and communicate with the public is far better than what John's offering you over at the
Oh,
Enterprise.
come on. You didn't think that column was brilliantly written? Come
I
on.
thought it was, but I thought he does this on TV with me all the time, so
Yeah.
this is fine.
Yeah.
No, but it was good stuff, and as I read it, it made me wonder. What is, obviously you're speaking about safety. And
Yes.
I mean, the title of it is Keeping Students Safe Requires Planning and Partnering.
Yep.
What prompted you to write that? And is it based on the district safety team findings?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So coming into this position last July 1st, one of the first things when I did, you know, coffee hours with parents and community members, one of the messages that resonated time and again was, hey, you really got to look at things like safety drills, things like provisions that we're putting in place to make sure that our buildings are well fortified, that all of our kids, all of our staff members are safe. So it has been a priority in, you know, taking over as superintendent of the district. So what I addressed in that column were some of the immediate work that we've done vis-a-vis planning for drills and so on. And recently, towards the end of January, we had a team of kind of retired law enforcement consultants, folks who have worked as, say, like school resource officers, but also detectives in a few different communities across the Commonwealth, come into our district for 2 days to kind of do a deep dive. And during early morning into the evening, and kind of go through each of our schools with a fine-tooth comb to see, okay, where are potential vulnerabilities? Kind of looking at the structure and infrastructure, but also kind of human practices as well. So just within the last week, we kind of got a very comprehensive report from them as far as things that we need to work on, and some of it can just be things like doors and better fortification of classroom doors, exterior doors, but some of it speaks to things like security cameras, exterior lighting, various pieces where in relatively short money we can make things safer, plus along with recommendations for drill planning that we're going to be doing. We will be doing our partners, with the Sandwich Police Department and the fire department, have been terrific with us. We meet every 3 weeks or so. But we're planning, and it's my understanding, and it hasn't been done in quite some time, a full-scale evacuation starting with the Forestdale School, going to the Center for Active Living with at least a partial reunification type drill, just to get the sense of what that looks like.
So this is really built around active shooter situations.
It is, but also knowing, you prepare for that type of, God forbid, scenario. But if you actually look at the research in doing this safety training, a lot of times having these types of drills and these skills with our staff and with our kids can be some other crisis happens in town. Say there was something like a train derailment and it was carrying chemicals or something where we needed a rapid evacuation because something was happening, or the opposite, a lockdown type thing.
Right.
So getting this embedded and having a strong sense of what are the behaviors that I need to have instinctually when there's a crisis. So that work, we will be doing that full-scale evacuation drill in June.
Okay.
Also, a lot of kind of tabletop type drills as well. Because again, the feedback was, hey, let's do everything that we can. And I think COVID, those 3 school years of COVID slowed everything down. So we really got to get those pieces up and running.
Okay. This is a Greg question.
Okay.
Next year's school calendar is set. What the heck is up with those half days? And I've never asked this question to a superintendent, so I want to ask you this: who actually says school's going to start on this day, before the holiday, after the holiday? We're going to start on a Friday, but only a half day, and then resume on a Monday. Like, it always seems to be kind of a bizarre selection of when things happen on the start and the end of a school day.
Okay,
school
season. It's actually not very random. It's actually pretty deliberate. Sandwich is kind of a cool community in the sense that they have this really, really nice middle ground where we actually have contractually and in policy, school committee policy, that if Labor Day is the 4th or earlier, we start after Labor Day. The classes start the Tuesday after. If it's later than that, then we start in August. Or I'm sorry, if it's earlier than that.
Yeah.
So I think this year Labor Day falls on something like the 4th. So therefore, as a result, we start with kids on Tuesday the 5th of September. State law, it's 180 days.
Yeah.
Probably the more important thing is with Ed Reform of 1993, you have to, for elementary students, have 900 hours of instruction, and for secondary students, 990. So kind of an interesting thing. Half days do count as an instructional day, so they count towards the 180.
Yeah.
Whereas, but probably the more important numbers are the 900 and the 990.
Yeah.
So your question, so again, you have to have 180 days. We have inclusive within that 3 additional days. One is just kind of a orientation day, and then a couple professional development days. The half days are sometimes, to be 100% honest, they are things that are just kind of memorialized in tradition. The famous one is always the Wednesday before Thanksgiving is always
Oh,
a
sure.
half day.
That's right.
I mean, growing up in the 70s and 80s in Western Massachusetts, we always had a half day.
Yeah.
In Rhode Island, that's not a thing. Everybody goes the full day
Interesting.
on that Wednesday before, and people like me who've worked in both states generally like, oh, Rhode Island, are you kidding me? This is for
Yeah.
the birds. So some of it is tradition.
But the calendar isn't arbitrary. It's not just, it's much more specific. It's much more regimented and legal.
It's regimented. Realize there are some aspects that are addressed in the teacher's contract, so
Right.
it's subject. Anything in the school calendar is subject to collective bargaining.
Right.
So, and some of it, one of the pieces that has been kind of a hot button topic for a long, long time is like, oh, why do we do this stupid February and April vacation? Why can't we be like a lot of other states across the country and just do 1 week in March and have that as the spring break? I think you'd find really, really candidly, a lot of educators would fight that.
Really?
And
Why would they fight that?
because I think when you think about after 33 years, it's been my experience that the September to the holidays goes by in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And then the real grind, so to speak, of the school year is January to June.
Right.
And if you really think about the ebb and the flow of, okay, we're going to come back after the holidays, we're going to do 6 or 7 weeks, then a vacation, then another 7 or 8 weeks, then a vacation, and then another 7 or 8 weeks, end of school year.
Yeah.
So it does have a rhythm. I've heard the argument used, oh, well, you really want to close the school for a week in February because you want to kill the germ. Well,
Interesting. Killing the germs.
That could be, really honestly, that could be pseudoscience.
Right.
But I have heard that. Again, neighboring Rhode Island has tried the experiment of, okay, let's try to go halfway. And what we'll do is we'll give the kids maybe President's Day weekend, and we'll tack on a Tuesday to make it a mini vacation.
Yeah.
And then the kids will go to school Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or something like that.
Got it.
Doesn't go over well.
All right, I hear you. Last May's town meeting, the town supported the debt exclusion.
Yes.
That is in part helping fund some of these facility repairs. And
Sure.
Can you give me an update on where we're standing with those projects?
Sure.
And are you going to have a big corner office?
It's going to be massive. It's
massive.
going to be huge.
Yeah, a lot of windows, a lot of windows.
Correct. So one of the key priorities has been to do the playgrounds at Forestdale and Oak Ridge, and that's progressing exactly on schedule with all designs. All of the equipment has been ordered, and we'll probably commence probably within the next week or two, taking down the existing playground equipment, and then the build is probably 4 to 6 weeks for everything, and we're shooting for Memorial Day weekend for the opening of those 2 playgrounds, so that's progressing nicely. Within the last couple weeks, finally, the Council on Aging is out of the Human Resources building and into the Center for Active Living. So they've commenced the process of doing the demolition, the interior demolition of the Human Resources. And we've got a target date of November 1st for central office to be out of the wing school and to be there. And a lot of those other projects, things that maybe aren't quite as sexy as a new playground, but are desperately needed, doing some of the envelope repairs at Forestdale and Oak Ridge.
Meaning the exterior of the building.
Correct. If you think
Or the
about
roof.
up top of like the flashing and things like that.
Yeah.
The roof repair over the pool section of the high school. So those are progressing as far as going out to bid. Our new facilities director, Chris George, is trying to aggressively go after getting the bid process up and running. For example, for really a couple of reasons. And I think most people can relate to this, where we are with regard to inflation. He's generally finding that what was projected for some of these expenses versus what they're coming out at. There's issues with labor, there's issues with getting materials. For example, he went out to bid for 3 new HVAC rooftop units for the middle high school.
Not cheap.
Not cheap. Came back around $500,000 more than the original budget as it was put together in May of last year. But he was also told right now for each of those, for those HVAC units, there is a lead time of something like 48 weeks, almost a year.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then what happens is this kind of effect where, the guy who's bidding on it, the contractor who's bidding on it, is projecting, okay, 48 weeks out, what are my labor costs going to be, and so on, and there's an additional charge. So
talk about playing whack-a-mole.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
exactly.
That's insane.
So things are progressing.
Okay.
We gave a report on that at the last school committee meeting, and I think the original plan was to spread these projects out over a period of 4 to 5 years, and I think you're going to see it. We're going to work really hard to compress it more within 2 to 3.
Got it. You gave a recent presentation of your entry plan. We're running long on time, but I'm interested in some highlights. Can you first tell us what that entry plan is, and then give us a couple of key takeaways?
So I think the entry plan is really, it's very, very common when a superintendent comes into a district as a completely new person to kind of spend the first 6 to 9 months doing a lot of learning and listening, or maybe listening and learning. Kind of based upon meeting with all different stakeholder groups, doing a lot of observations. I take a lot of pride that I do spend a lot of time in classrooms trying to see what's the curriculum, what's the type of instruction that our students are exposed to each and every single day. And then from taking all of those data points, kind of putting together a cohesive whole as far as what is the current state of the district. And from everything that I've heard and everything that I know, what should be our strategic priorities moving forward. So I literally, my first couple weeks, my very first school committee meeting, I talked about, hey, this is my game plan, and then I'll deliver a report based upon what I found. So essentially, some of the big takeaways, and I don't think they're anything surprising, and I think they're things that we've talked about in previous episodes, but I think this is a tremendous community, and there's a lot of loyalty to our school district, and there's a real passion and commitment to our success, internally, but also externally within the community. But I think there are some key pieces that we need to work on if we are going to continue to be viable and strong as a school district. And the one piece that I talk about quite a bit is just, I refer to it as stemming the tide, and looking at, stemming the tide of families selecting other options, particularly at the secondary level, other than the middle high school.
That whole enrollment
Absolutely,
issue.
absolutely. That's one of my absolute key priorities. I think we also...
So if I could just interrupt you. So in the time that you've now been here on the job, as you sit here today, how has your opinion changed from what you initially really recognized as an enrollment issue in Sandwich to what you now know about the issues?
To be 100% honest, it has, if anything, it has reinforced what my gut instincts were. And I think, we had this conversation before where I see it as ensuring every single kid has a strong sense of belonging to their school community, ensuring that we have academic rigor and high expectations for all kids. But then the third piece is around customer service. It's around communication, it's around follow through, it's around connecting with families in a timely and relevant way, and so on. Those are the pieces, it's really in any school district, but those are the pieces where we have to be consistent in our practices across all three schools.
Got it. Okay. We've got a big May 4th, big school, big election day here in Sandwich. A lot of races. As it relates to the school committee, 3 candidates are seeking election to a 1-year unexpired term.
Correct.
And then 2 candidates are seeking 2 3-year seats. Obviously, it's the 1-year unexpired that's going to be a little bit of it's a contested race.
Correct.
What's the superintendent thinking when you're watching the players and you learn who's pulled papers and who's now going to be running, and you're driving by those corners of the lots and you see all the names for school committee? How do you interpret an election of essentially your boss? As plural.
I think what you have to do is you have to realize in your position, you need to be able to work effectively with all different types. And in my past, I've worked with people that were very, very like-minded to me, very like-minded as far as my philosophy of education, my politics, the way I viewed situation. But I've also worked with people that were very, very different than me. And I do think, honestly, while sometimes politics does enter the fray, and unfortunately we live in a highly polarized society, our job and my job is, even though it's got a political aspect, and sometimes I have to be a politician, it really should be apolitical. I am an educator. When push comes to shove, even though I'm Dr. Joe and I'm the superintendent, when push comes to shove, I am a teacher. And it's my job to work with other teachers. It's my job to work with kids. It's my job to work with families. So I view it as apolitical, and oftentimes I'll have candidates reach out to me and say, hey, can we grab a cup of coffee? And can we talk about your perceptions of things and so on? And I always willingly do that because I know, hey, I don't know how an election is going to specifically go, and I got to work with these people.
Have you been in contact? Have any of the candidates so far, have they reached out to you?
Correct. Yeah, one has. One has. I have connected with one of the 3-year candidates.
So if someone doesn't?
Oh, no.
Does that?
I honestly, I don't think it necessarily says anything, to be 100% honest. But I do think if you are putting yourself out there for a role like this, an important role like this, you really should know what the critical issues are currently in the school district.
Last question. Got to get this in. Those nights. The hockey, 4-3 in overtime against Norwell, lost TD Garden. But man, what a season.
An amazing season. I was at the Garden, and I was with Jim Mulcahy, the principal, and we were a little nervous, honestly, after the first period when they were down, and I think they were behind by shots on goal, something like 12-3. It wasn't close.
Yeah.
So the amount of grit that they showed was just absolutely amazing. But in the end analysis, and I'd like to end on this.
Yeah.
I'm very, very close friends with Bob Baldwin, who's the executive director of the MIAA. He's former superintendent in Fairhaven. And the next morning, he sent me a text and he said, hey, tough loss, Joe, but I got to tell you, everybody who was on site, including the assistant executive director of the MIAA, commented, oh my God, what class that team has. What a great group of young men and coach. And I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Our kids are, the team, they're going to remember that for their lifetime.
Yeah.
But I think when push comes to shove, the way that they represented the Blue Knights, the way that they represented the school and our community was second to none.
Yeah.
And they're winners, and they always will be winners.
They will always be winners. And it's such a terrific, disappointing end, but what a great way
Absolutely.
to go out proud and how they handled themselves. So that's terrific. Dr. Joe Marushchak, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate it. I want to remind everybody that we are taking those questions, which you can email to me at askOurSuperintendent@gmail.com. And I like really gritty ones. Like, give me a dissertation and a couple of attachments. That makes my day. I'm serious. But in all seriousness, thank you, Joe, for being here. Thank you for watching. And we'll see you online, and we'll see you soon.